I think I'm a pretty decent saver, but I'm married to an extreme saver.
It's a matter of perception. She said you're not treating our house like a frat house. Welcome to the Grace Marriage Podcast. I'm Brad Rhodes.
And I'm Marilyn Rhodes. We're here to help you build a marriage that's stronger, more connected, and full of grace.
I'm Rick Dayton, joining Brad and Marilyn as we bring you weekly conversations designed to inspire and equip you to live intentionally in your marriage.
We'll share practical tips, powerful stories, and strategies to help you and your spouse grow closer and thrive together.
So whether you're just starting out or have been married for years, there's always room to grow. Let's do this together. This is the Grace Marriage Podcast.
Today we're going to make sense out of money in your marriage. C-E-N-T-S, not S-E-N-S-E. We're going to talk about things that are a little bit difficult, but at the same time, they don't have to be. Talking about money does not have to lead to a fight every single time, and that's why we're doing it today on the Grace Marriage Podcast. Joined around the table by Brad and Marilyn Rhodes, founders of Grace Marriage. So is one a spender and one a saver? Is it always that way in a marriage? Just sometimes that way? And what happens if both people are spenders or both people are savers? I mean, are these huge stereotypes, and are these questions that we wrestle with or we need to at least ask?
Absolutely. In most marriages, more of a spender marries more of a saver. Now, there are exceptions. Mm-hmm. In our marriage, a spender married a saver. But
they did.
The spender did not know the saver was a saver until the spender married the saver.
So it was a bait and switch.
Okay, so let's use names here to identify the guilty, all right? Saver, spender?
I'm the spender.
Okay.
I'm definitely the
Have
spender.
you always been that way?
I mean, actually, I think I'm a pretty decent saver, but I'm married to an extreme saver.
It's a matter of perception.
Okay.
It is, but yes, we haven't unpacked the fact that he tricked me.
No.
Your microphone's turned off here for a second. Marilyn, you've got the floor. How did this, what do you mean he tricked you? Because he spent lavishly on you when you dated?
Absolutely.
Right.
We ate out all the time.
26 straight days.
Yes.
Right.
He bought me, anything I wanted to do, we did. And we got married, and boom, the floodgates closed.
We're adults now.
So you didn't talk about budgeting during those 26 dinners out, is what you're saying?
We did not until we got married. And in his defense, I did start graduate school. I quit bringing an income to the table.
That wasn't
working. And then he was starting a law practice. So we did need a budget.
Right.
And I understood that. But when going from having a ton of fun to no fun, it's hard.
and I don't know what happened.
Welcome to marriage. You're no fun at all.
But I'm not sure what happened because I didn't really worry about money at all in dating. I mean, I remember when I bought her engagement ring, I just saw what I had left in my account.
You spent it.
I spent all of it. That's how much they said, how much can you afford on a ring? Well, that's how much. I didn't emergency fund. I mean, none of that was I didn't think of any of it. As soon as we got married, I don't know if I felt like I've got to act like a responsible adult now, or I don't know what happened, but
that's probably what happened.
It did change overnight.
So then what happens if you've got a spender and a spender together?
That would be fun.
Do you have a disaster on your hands, or not necessarily?
Yeah, I've not seen. I mean, I'm sure
you could have a disaster.
It would be, because that's one of the beauties of marriage. It's like you're a check on one another. You're both better because of one another. Now, you got to learn how to communicate. You got to learn how not to fight every time you talk about it, and that's another issue. But I'm more generous and more spendy because of Marilyn. I would say Marilyn saves more and is more careful because of me. Now, we got to be careful.
Did you say that again? I like hearing that.
You did? Well, I don't want to say it again. But
you can play it back later on the podcast anytime you like.
But I am more free to have fun financially. I'm more the spontaneous, let's do fun stuff type of person. But Marilyn helps me spend money to do extra fun stuff. But yeah, we make each other better in marriage if we learn how to communicate. So our differences are actually a gift. Now, they can be a fraction of our marriage if we don't know how to navigate it. But if we learn how to navigate it, the Rhodes family's much better with both our perspective than we would be if there were two Brads or two Marilyns. If there were two Brads, it'd be 79 in the house right now.
Because you would not let her turn the air conditioning on in the summertime.
It's not that I wouldn't let her. It's just as soon as Marilyn goes out of town, I turn it up because I'm saving money every day she's gone.
So then why is, I mean, we're laughing about these things. We understand we're all in those situations. Why then is money so hard to talk about?
It's hard because I feel like it's harder for me to talk about than Brad, because I feel like I'm the one that's guilty all the time. Because I'm the spender.
He makes you feel that way, or
no?
or
I think
because,
I just feel
okay.
that. I feel that way. Not guilty.
I've made you feel that way.
Well,
You've told me I made you feel that way.
You have made me feel that way, but I do feel bad because it is hard. It's
Why do
hard
you
to
spend?
stay in a budget.
Why do you spend?
Because, well, we have five kids.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Right,
I mean, the
life.
reality is shoes, clothes, things like that, insurance. I mean, those are realities.
And right now, everything's
and
doubled.
candles, and
Candles, nice smelling.
No, there are other things
That is important.
you have a monthly candle budget,
Right.
No.
Right.
So, but life is expensive, and now everything's more expensive. Brad, it's funny because we have a very set budget that I try to stay in, but food budget, we've had kids leave our college, and Brad's like, why is our food budget not getting less? I'm like, because groceries have doubled.
Right.
You know, it really is. It's hard right now.
Mm-hmm.
But we've had some really funny interactions because one time I asked her if I could take over the grocery shopping.
Oh, that one didn't go well.
Because I'm like, Marilyn spends so much, she didn't have to. I mean, there's
this-
$4 ham, there's $10 ham. She buys the 10 every time.
Well, we don't want it to have all the chemicals in it. So this was when
One was actually made from a pig.
Right. So we this is when he left practicing law and we started Grace Marriage.
Yeah.
So we definitely needed a little adjustment.
Belt tightening.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had we went to the grocery, and Brad said, "I'm going to go with you to the grocery." That was.
Did you say why?
And so he followed me around the grocery, and I wanted to buy healthier things, and healthier things are more expensive.
Sure.
And Brad wanted to buy the spam looking ham that looks like it's congealed, like it's
Ham in a can.
It's
Right.
horrible. And then he's wanting to buy like Totina's pizza. I'm like, we are not a frat house. We're not.
She said, "You're
feeding a
not
frat
treating
house."
our house like a frat house," is what she told me.
I'm like, you can't. So we really, and he was like, why don't, maybe I should just do the grocery shopping. That
Did you
went
let
over
him?
like a lead balloon. No,
Oh,
I went.
You refused no.
That went to an unhealthy communication. This is an example of what not to do.
She left the room to go work out, and literally she got halfway there, but she was so mad she spontaneously turned around to come back. I went out in the hall, and the kids heard the whole thing because it was loud enough to work through the heavy door.
So that was not our healthier communication example, but it was, circumstances. We were shifting at that point.
So
and
how did
it's
you
hard to
resolve it?
shift.
I mean, how did that? I mean,
We have a bigger food budget than he would like.
Got
We
it.
have a smaller food budget than I would like. And so that you have to work together, but you have to work within your means. Be a budget. I did see when we were early married, I thought, I don't want to write down everything I spend. We'll be okay. We've got that overdraft protection stuff. I said that. So, but when we wrote down everything we spent, we realized we're spending more than we're bringing in. We can't do that.
Right.
Way more than we realized. And when we started writing it down, it did make us be more careful, and it did reduce our spending. So unfortunately, we've continued to have a budget.
But it's considering the
fortunately.
interest and making love and grace being primary through the thing, so that because initially in our first year of marriage, we could not talk about money at all. If we brought it up at all, Marilyn always felt like I was sideways preaching at her. You know why she felt that way?
Why?
Because I was sideways preaching.
You
at her.
were, yeah.
And then but over time, I realized Marilyn is a wise steward. My dad jokingly said Marilyn can make a nickel dance. I mean, literally. I mean, Marilyn is amazing financially, but I wasn't focusing on the positive. I wasn't focusing on what's good. I wasn't. And, a friend of mine pointed out, he said, "Brett, you're more generous with everybody in the world than you are your own wife." It's like, you'd give me anything I needed. If Marilyn, it's like you give her. So that was really convicting. So I changed some in that regard. So we learned to communicate better. I learned to be much looser financially. Marilyn, I'd say primarily Marilyn's trying to spend less. I'm trying to spend more, and it's working. When I was always trying to spend less and she's always trying to spend more, it wasn't working.
Right. When we think about, is there anything in the Bible that's talked about more than money? I mean, the reality is there are so many stories and parables where Jesus talks about money throughout the Old Testament, throughout the New Testament. It is there. I mean, we have got this playbook of how to deal with it. Where does Grace Marriage come down in terms of teaching Scripture, using Scripture to help couples with money?
Well, we have sessions on communication, conflict management. We have sessions directly on money. So it's regularly communicating and talking with and learning how to address issues where you have differences. Because for some reason, people are just a lot different. We have 5 kids. Our 5 kids are so different on money. They were raised in the same home by the same folks. We have high spenders, high savers, love shopping, can't stand shopping. I tried to teach one of my kids savings, and she's like, Dad, I don't understand. Why would I save up for something I want later when there's stuff I want now? Because that doesn't make sense to me.
Right.
I mean, but it's just interesting. So in Grace Marriage curriculum, it's just an ongoing effort. And overall, we're a lot better at talking about finance than we used to.
And so at the beginning of our marriage, we were having to learn what this looks like. But then when we shifted into Grace Marriage, that was a shift, and tensions were a little high there. So often what fuels the frustration behind the communication is maybe there is the fear of, this, I feel financially unstable when we're doing, the fears drive tough conversations. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah. And Marilyn says, it's like, it's hard to communicate about money with you, Brad, because one day you're like, we're fine, we're great, you're doing great. 2 days later, you're freaked out, everything's falling apart. So it's you have to be patient with one another as well, because we have days where we feel like things are stable, everything's fine. Then some unexpected expense occur. You might be in a mood, something may have happened at work, and then all of a sudden you have a whole nother level of stress. So a lot of it's ongoing grace and patience with one another, in not letting contention set in.
Right, and communicating. Like what's going on, like sharing when there has been an issue that happened at work, or if a large expense came up. Acknowledge that that's hard with each other and understand where each of you are coming from. That's so good at diffusing the situation when we allow each feel understood and where we're coming from.
And expenses, they seem to come in waves. I don't know if you've seen that. It's all of a sudden, we need a whole new air conditioner. Oh, the sink stopped up. Oh, it's like, oh my goodness, it's like thing after thing after thing.
Right.
And it's kind of navigating and being able to communicate and making it through a lot of the unexpected stuff. But it doesn't, the differences don't have to be contention. They can be a gift.
Right.
But communication has to be there for that to occur.
Yeah.
And in the grace piece, because we still will communicate at times that isn't great on money, but because we understand the grace of God in marriage more, it doesn't mess our marriage up.
Not at all. And and used to, we couldn't talk about it at all, but we can absolutely have discussions about it now.
We have talked in the past, and it was in the first couple of months that we started doing the podcast, so maybe episode 8, where we're talking about, setting boundaries, rules of engagement. We're talking about healthy disagreements. Is the rule for a general marriage problem different than a discussion, a rule over money? Or do we use the same rules of engagement, the same healthy disagreements in money? I mean, because for whatever reason, it seems to be more emotionally charged when we're talking about dollars and cents.
I think we use the same principles when we come to a discussion about money.
Okay.
I think it's really important.
I would agree. And it is, for some reason, money just triggers people weird. If a pastor preaches on money, it is a charged subject. And recognizing it's a charged subject and trying to figure out why it's so charged with you. Is it that there's love of money in your heart? Because the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, as it says in Scripture.
Right.
Is it because it's a lack of fear, lack of trust? Is it because you're not being wise financially and you're spending too much? You need to work on it. You really need to kind of figure out what's below the surface to work on yourselves to help you work together.
What do you do if one person constantly is more upset about it and the other doesn't think that it's an issue? Meaning sometimes, Brad, it might really, really, really bother you that Marilyn spends maybe a little bit more than what the budget says, that it's really eating away at you. But Marilyn, as far as you're concerned, you're within 5% or 8% or whatever what the budget is. It's really not that big a deal. We have bad months and we'll be right back to it as we go. What do you do in that situation where one is really, really eaten up by it and the other one thinks, problem? What problem?
Well, I've learned if it's a big deal to your spouse, it's a big deal. You know, so whether it's money or anything else, if it's a big deal to your spouse, you need to make it a big deal for you. Because if you don't, it can be really dangerous. So if I'm thinking it's a really big deal to me and Marilyn just doesn't care, what message that send to me? Well, I don't really care about Brad. I don't care what Brad thinks. If Marilyn says something's really important to her, I'm like, it's not important, I just move on. That's going to be relationally fracturing. So
Because she's not feeling heard.
she's not feeling heard. She's not feeling prioritized. What's important to her is not important to me. And then ultimately that can result in real marriage problems.
Right. Right.
And we're one. So if it's an issue for Brad, it's an issue for me. We feel that when even though we might ignore it, which is unhelpful and feels hurtful to the one. Like if he feels it's a big deal and I'm just blowing it off, that's really insensitive.
Right.
And if I'm think an issue is important and he blows it off, that thinks something's important with a kid, I'm more focused on some of the details. And if he doesn't make it important, then I feel he's being insensitive.
And I give you an example, like in parenting. Marilyn's a very detailed parent. Diet, education, a lot of things, very detailed. I'm more of the everything's going to be fine.
But how can that be if you're the one that's making a budget and making spreadsheets on? I mean, that's human nature. I get it, but it seems so counterintuitive to me.
Humans are profound inconsistencies.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
But Marilyn, and she's very detailed. I remember telling her one time, I said, Marilyn, if you didn't do all this stuff with the diet and with everything would just be fine. It's not that big a deal. And man, she basically said, you just invalidated everything I do. And you basically said all things
Doesn't
I'm doing.
matter.
It doesn't matter. It's not important. So if I don't make those things important to me, it's a problem. I remember telling her that, and I remember her response.
And you've done it exactly once, right?
Yeah, I've not gone back. I've not gone back for seconds.
So as we go through this, I mean, there are so many books, there are magazines, there are self-help articles, or jump on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, wherever you go, everybody's got advice about what to do about money, right? I mean, you even mentioned when you're talking about the house that you fell in love with, it fell within Dave Ramsey's 30% of your budget shouldn't go beyond that for your housing. It fell within that, but you still didn't feel right about it. I mean, how do we filter out conventional wisdom, biblical wisdom, what's best for our marriage? How do we say, this is what I want to pay attention to?
But what helped us was we found people that we both had mutual respect for.
We did.
That we felt like we liked the way they do life and we liked the way they do finances. And anytime we had an issue we didn't agree with, we'd go to them. In that house.
Were they tiebreaker?
Yes, they were.
I mean, you would almost go to them and say, you've got the vote.
If those 5 people had lined up and said, I think the house is fine, it's a wise thing, we would have purchased that house. You know, I wanted to buy that house because I did want to honor Marilyn. It's just I couldn't get there. You know, but it's having somebody like that to help you. And we kind of have a 2-0 rule.
But you can't do that for everything.
We have a 2-0
on the
rule.
big things.
We generally have a 2-0 rule. If we both don't agree with the purchase, we don't purchase it if it's over a certain amount. Now, that requires that, I mean, if you have one selfish spouse that's all about himself, that rule can be abused.
Yeah.
But if you have spouses that love and try to honor each other and consider each other interests above their own, that 2-0 rule works really well. And it's actually protective.
What do you do in a situation? And my wife and I have run into this many, many times. We both agree that we're going to buy a new car. You know, we've tried to save and we've got money that's saved up for it, but we look at that and we say we both need a new car. I might think we need an $18,000 car. She thinks we need a $12,000 car. What do you do with that delta?
You buy the $12,000 car.
I'm going to ask Marilyn. Marilyn, what do you... I'm hoping Marilyn has a better answer for me. But no, I mean, do you do that because you're saying you're honoring your spouse in terms of where she's coming from?
It depends where your finances
or because you're the spender in there?
He's
the saver. I'm sorry.
It depends where your finances are.
Right.
You know, it depends on your finances. If you have plenty of finances And it's not going to be unwise to buy the nicer car. It might be wise for you to lay down your interest and consider your spouse and buy the more expensive car. But you can't just answer that question without knowing the overall financial position of the family.
Sure.
Because if I want to honor Marilyn and spend more, but I'm going to honor Marilyn by spending more, and we spend double our budget. Well, loving Marilyn that way is unwise. Now, honoring Marilyn by spending more within a budget, because God calls us to be wise stewards. Everything is His for us to steward over. So wise stewardship is part.
It's not ours to begin with.
But the wise stewardship is part of it. So your question about the car, it depends on the financial situation. It depends on what your other things look like. Giving. What are you doing in those aspects?
Right. The question of money has been around forever. It's not going away, is it?
No.
I mean, it's always going to be there. We will always, and Jesus even said the poor will always be with you, right? There are going to be some who have more. There are some who are less. That notion of stewardship, where does that come in a relationship? Because we talk all the time about the things we want to buy. Do we argue about the things we want to give? Do we get into that situation? Do you hear that listen, here's the situation. I feel we ought to be giving 15%. No, wait a second. We can only give 10. Do you hear that in sessions? Do you hear that from people?
From time to time, yes.
That one wants to be real philanthropic, one wants to be real giving?
And as believers, we should be the biggest givers.
It's true.
And unfortunately, believers aren't always perceived as the biggest givers.
Right.
We have a friend of ours who's a waitress, and she dreads Sunday. She goes, I work the hardest and I get paid the least.
Isn't that terrible?
And it's unfortunate, but she said all the waitresses and servers never want to work Sundays because they have big crowds and low tips.
It should be the opposite.
It should be the opposite. So
So she's saying that the Sunday crowd does not give as generously as her Monday through Saturday tables.
Not even close. And what needs to, it's like the more we love the Lord, the more we are going to be, the more we're going to consider others with our resources.
That's right.
And not ourselves.
Right.
So it is really working to grow closer to God, to be more cheerful givers so that, we're greater givers. I don't remember who the businessman says, he said he treats money like manure. He said, if you pile it up, it starts to stink. If you spread it around, things grow. So I think that really continue to try to grow in the grace of giving together as a couple, and also get to a point where you're working together as a couple. So you're both pursuing the Lord together. As you grow closer and closer to Jesus, both of you are likely to become more and more generous. And more of you are going to be likely to become more and more selfless, so you consider each other. So really the whole answer to the issue is draw close to me and I'll draw close to you. Then I'll give you a generous heart that considers your spouse above your own. And guess what? Money's not that big an issue then.
So it becomes a win all the way around. That even a spender and a saver can see we're looking there. We're not looking at our own interest.
Because if you're just trying to navigate finances and that's it, you take God out of the picture and pursuing Him out of the picture, you're never going to navigate it.
All right.
Another thought too is that looking at it as an investment. We tell people about dating. You're investing in your marriage. You're spending money, but you're investing in this relationship that we want to be beautiful before the Lord. So that's also, it's a tool. Money is also a tool that we use for giving. Like Brad said, it's so much more fun to give than receive, and to be generous to others, but also, like Brad said, be generous with your spouse when you can.
Yeah. Wrestling with the hard questions of dollars and cents and trying to make sense out of money within our marriage. We love the fact that you're here, and we ask that you share this message with other people as well. If it's helped you, it can help somebody else. And you may not have any idea what they're walking through right now. You may not realize that there are money issues on their table right now that are creating problems. But if you share this with them, perhaps they can get something out of it as well. Like, share, follow. Make sure you subscribe to it so you don't miss a single episode. And we can't wait until next time when we come back and talk about more important things that'll give more grace to your marriage through the Grace Marriage Podcast. See you next time.
Thank you for joining us on the Grace Marriage Podcast. We really hope you're feeling inspired to take intentional steps to grow in your marriage.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Your support helps us spread the message of grace and reach even more couples.
And if you have a moment, please leave us a review. Your feedback means a lot to us and helps others discover the podcast.
To learn more about how you can grow in your marriage, visit us at gracemarriage.com. Keep building stronger, grace-filled marriages.
We'll see you next week. on the Grace Marriage Podcast. Until then, keep growing in grace.